Her recent works include the biography of Punjab's Dalit icon, The Ballad of Bant Singh, and translation into English of Gulzar's anthology of poetry, Pluto, published by HarperCollins. Besides The Poet of the Revolution, Lal Singh Dil, and Stories of the Soil, an anthology of 41 short stories translated into English. She received the Punjabi Academy Award for her anthology of poems, Ek Nadi Sauli Jahi, I might pronounce it wrong, A Stream Somewhat Dark. Her poetry anthologies have also come out in English and Hindi. The Black Woman and Buri Auraton Ki Fehrist Se, from the roster of Wicked Women. Books edited by her include Our Voices, an anthology of Sark poetry, Half the Sky and the Children of the Night, 2 collections of Pakistani short stories, and several others. Urvashi Butalia co-founded Kali for Women in 1984 and in 2003 founded Zuban. With over 35 years of experience in feminist and independent publishing, she has a formidable reputation in the industry in India and abroad. She also has a long involvement in the women's movement in India and is a well-known writer, both in accounts to her credit, key 20 years and is on the advisory board of a number of national and international organizations. She has received many awards, among which are the Pandora Award for Women's Publishing, the French Chevalier d'Art de Lettres, the Nikkei Asia Award for Culture, and the Padma Shri, the highest civilian honor awarded by the Indian government, and the Goethe Medal. We welcome both of you. And just one little thing about how the session would proceed is that we will, of course, start with a conversation between the both of them. And then we shall open it up for questions from all of you who are present here with us. So we request you to please put your questions in the chat and we'll take it up from there. That's it from my end. I hand it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajasmita. Thank you, Megha. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's really nice to see lots of familiar names. I was looking through the list of all the people who are participating and recognizing lots of old friends. So glad to see you all here. So to add to what Rajasmita just said, the way we thought we'd structure this discussion is I'm not an Amrita Pritam scholar. I have worked on Partition and know her work as a woman writer, not only her work on Partition, but also her other work. But Nirupama is a different story altogether. Nirupama knows Amrita Pritam's work really well. And so we thought what we do is that I would begin by talking to her about Amrita Pritam's work, and we will of course focus on the specific things on Partition. And then we thought that we would talk a little bit about the kind of work that Seagull Foundation is doing with teachers and looking at how Partition can be taught. So taking Amrita Pritam's work as an example, what would we do if we were to teach Amrita Pritam to school students and so on. And then we thought that we'd have a discussion with you about the ideas that come out of there. And somewhere in between, we hope to be able to play you a couple of short videos of Amrita reading, some of her reading one poem, and also a little video of a lovely story that she tells. So that's how it's going to pan out. Let me begin by asking Nirupama. Niru, welcome and thank you for being here. So I want to start by asking you actually, how did you first discover the work of this writer who is so many things rolled into one? Feminist, I suppose, in many ways, a partition survivor. People have called her a rebel, involved with the Progressive Writers Association, winner of many awards, somebody who chose to live life completely on her own terms, and many other things. So how did you first discover Amrita, and what was that journey like?
You see, if you are in Punjab and somewhat rooted, there's no way my generation could have escaped Amrita, you know. But she came to me through my mother, because Amrita was widely translated into Urdu and Hindi. My mother used to subscribe to the monthly packet of Hind pocket books. So that would have Amrita's novels in, you know, Hindi translation. That is how she earned her money those days. I'm talking of the early 60s. But what made a big impact on me when I was barely 8 was that those Hind pocket books, in one of their advertisements, they had carried a few lines of Amrita's poem saying that this will come in the next issue or some such thing. And that was her famous poem called Janam Jali. दुखा दा बड़ा पारी सांझा सी ऐसे योग बली mehta janam jali. She talks about unhappy marriage through this idiom. But then, of course, she was there, one knew it. But then back to, after a few years staying outside Punjab, I did my school in final years of school in Shillong. When I returned, then, you know, there was a fascination for Punjabi writers. And by that time, when I was in college, Amrita Pritam was already bringing out a journal called Nagmani. She was the editor of it, which was a hugely popular journal of Punjabi literature. And she brought it out for 36 years. She would edit it, choose it, write it, and Imrose, her partner, would do the illustrations, and together they would post it. And this journal nurtured some 2 generations of Punjabi writers. Among the early writers for this journal were people like Surjit Patar, Dilip Kaur Tivana, Manjit Tivana, and a whole galaxy of Punjabi writers. So, but when I was 19, I once visited Delhi just after completing college, and I called up. I looked up her number in the directory. She was a big legend. I'm talking of 1975. And I called her up and I said, I'm from Chandigarh and I've read your stories and your books. I want to meet you. She was very warm. The quality of Amrita was that she was always there. She was accessible. She was very warm. So she said, what have you read? She questioned me. So I gave a short list. She says, oh, you are 19 and you have read all this? Okay, come tomorrow at 11 a.m. But next day, Urvashi, I got cold feet. I said, if I'll go, what will I say to her? I'll make a fool of myself. And I didn't go. Then again, several years later, after I joined the newspaper, she came to Chandigarh to inaugurate the NBT book fair. Even then, I didn't get a chance to meet her, but I saw her and someone else was covering it. But then, by that time, the courage of journalism and all had come. So in another trip to Delhi, I said, I want to come and interview you. Again, she agreed. Of course, I reached very late and she was very angry because Amrita would get up at 5 and start writing. By breakfast time, she had done with her writing, you know. And then she would busy herself in household chores or meeting people, whatever. But anyway, Rose made sure that I come in. And the next day I interviewed her. And after that, then there was a constant. The story I did was bringing up Nagmani, how together they brought up this magazine. Then there was I had become part of the charmed circle as such. So then it was a long association till the last. Uh, and of course, then I started writing. Such were the times that, it was English was considered passe among the left-wing groups and others that I was connected with. And to be a writer, you had to write in your mother tongue. So very young, I switched over to writing poetry, at least the creative part of it, in Punjabi. And the first poems were accepted, first two poems were accepted by Amrita Pritam. And that's how the friendship and the relationship grew. And so many like me were close to Amrita. It was our whole generation was close to her.
What a lovely story. It reminds me of many things, actually. When you mentioned Hind pocket books and the package of books that used to arrive monthly, I mean, this was one of the miracles of publishing, where Hind pocket books had this huge membership of lakhs, 4 or 5 lakhs, and they would send out books. And by the time I joined publishing, I think this miracle was like at its fag end. And I always heard about it. So for me, it's been something, that I've carried in my head as a publisher as a goal to be reached, but I don't think we'll ever reach it, certainly not in the pandemic. And when you talked of your hesitation at meeting Amrita, and then, of course, finally, when you met her, I was reminded of the fact that, she used to live in Hauz Khas in Delhi in her last years. And for years, I had an office which was in the next street in Hauz Khas. And I always wanted to walk across and meet her, never had the courage to, and I never did it and regretted it afterwards. But then reading her and reading about her, I read this lovely story of how after partition, when she'd come to Delhi, she worked in All India Radio on the Punjabi cultural program, and it was MS Randhawa who gave her that job. Very interestingly, I was recently working on a book that we published in Zuban, which is the autobiography of a woman called Saida Bano, who was the partner of the once mayor of Delhi, Noor, and who came to Delhi at the time of partition, got a job in All India Radio with, I think Randhawa was also involved, and ran the Urdu program. And I thought, how interesting that these two women, I wonder if they ever met. I don't know.
I'm sure they would have. I'm sure they would have.
In a small sort of place. So, yeah. So, Nirupama, then let's look at, since we're talking about partition, what place do you think partition and the experience of partition, the migration or the refugeeism that Amrita experienced, what did it have in her work? Because there are certain of her works that focus on that, but I think it ran through much deeper, right?
Absolutely. Amrita Pritam, before I go to her immortal poem, which is considered the anthem of protest at what happened at partition and what happened during partition. See, Amrita was in Lahore. Lahore was the city that gave her fame. That was where her first books were published. And she was a radio announcer at the Lahore radio station. And very popular, very extremely popular. And since she was a very beautiful woman too, there were always people after her. And then she wrote one story based on an English story that one girl and 26 men. So Lahore, the cultural capital of Punjab, and Amrita was the prima donna of Lahore in those days. She had already made a name for herself as a poet. And she was at the radio station and she got offers for film roles also, which the family did not accept, that no, you can't go into films. And she had a little regret till almost the end, till she got the Gyanpith Award. And I was there and Imrose told her, Emma, aren't you happy that you didn't go to films now? Now you've got this award. But you see, Amrita saw the partition um, enact itself in her life, in her home, and the psyche which was to be affected deeply. At the time of partition, when Amrita and her husband with two children fled from their home uh, in Lahore, nothing, whatever they were wearing was all that they had. And with that, they fled and they went first to Dehradun. They may be having a relative there or someone they knew. Her husband had a quite paying, he was well off in the sense that he had a very popular hosiery shop in Anarkali. Of course, it was a mismatch. Amrita's dreams were very different from those of a shopkeeper. And then came the problem of resettling, how to begin again. And that's how Amrita traveled with her two children to Delhi to see if she could get some work. That's when she landed with this job. Randhawa was very supportive of people who had come, plundered with the partition. And the house caste plots were given to a number of writers who went for 5,000 rupees each in the early 50s. You see, and then when she was returning, willy-nilly I have come to the poem only. When she was returning by a night train from Delhi to Dehradun, she says her two children were with her in the compartment of a train, and she had one red shawl with a tillewala border, which she had cut into two to cover them. It was a dark night, and there were trees, the shadows of trees outside. She says they loomed like sentinels of sorrow. And it was there that I started penning this poem, Aj Aakhaं Waris Shah Nu, Kito Kabran Vichoo Bol. The Aj Kitabe Ishq Da Koi Agla Varka Phol. As you would know, she was going back to the legend, the most famous kissa legend we have, the ballad we have of Heer Ranjha, the great lovers of Punjab, and penned by Waris Shah. So the shock and the pain was that how could, a place which nurtured such love could have done such loot, such plunder, mass rapes, displacement, and then this poem was born. It was the first dirge, they say, the first dirge to partition. Pehla kirna, as they say. Of course, here I cannot but add one more thing, that the male poets, the men, for a long time were quite unhappy that, how come Amrita is such a famous writer? We write far better, and anyway, it's not a woman's job to write. And several poems came after that on partition. It was Amrita's intensity and her way of looking at partition with a woman's eyes, Very often in a male-dominated society, things like rape and killing of women and all, the men are so embarrassed that they wouldn't even those who are not party to it or don't believe in it, would rather not talk about it. But here was this woman telling the whole story of what had happened in 1947. And that poem just spread its wings and flew all over. After being published in India, it was published in Pakistan, in Shahmukhi. Mm-hmm. And Faiz Ahmad Faiz was imprisoned those days. And the poem reached him, that magazine where it was, and he read it, and he says he was amazed that this poem has come out and what this woman has done. And he says when he came out from the jail, he found that people were keeping that poem in their pockets. They were keeping that poem in their pockets, taking it out and reading it. That was the first, dirge, also the first catharsis, the first telling the partition story as a woman saw it. I was wondering if we could have Amrita's little video where she talks about this poem.
Yes, sure. This is the one where she's talking about.
Yeah.
Short 1 minute, one mega. One.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Sorry, just give me a minute to get my act together.
मुझे याद आता है एक बार पाकिस्तान से दोस्त भाई मिल गए तो उन्होंने थोड़े से केले मेरे आगे रख दिए। मैं हैरान हुई, ये क्या? कहने लगी ये मेरी तरफ से नहीं है, मैं आ रहा था तो एक केले बेचने वाला भागता हुआ आया, मुझे कहने लगा तुम दिल्ली जा रहे हो? मैंने कहा हाँ। कहता तुम अमृता से मिलोगे? मैंने कहा जाहिर है जरूर मिलूंगा। कहते जिसने बारिश शाह नज़म कही थी? मैंने कहा हाँ मिलूंगा। कहते ये केले उसे दे देना, मैं यही दे सकता हूँ, मैं समझूंगा कि मेरा आधा हज हो गया। इस प्यार का बच्चा।
Nirupama, do you want to briefly translate it, or would you like me to, for those who are not Hindi speakers?
Yes, I can. Someone who knew Amrita was taking a train to Delhi from Lahore, and suddenly a banana seller came running to him, and he said, are you going to Delhi? So he said, yes. He says, will you meet Amrita Pritam there? He said, yes, I will. He says, the same one who wrote the poem Aaj Aankhan Baris Shanu. He said, yes. Then he ran and brought a few bananas and said that, please give them to her. When these bananas reach her, I feel my Hajj is done, that my pilgrimage is complete.
Interestingly, I mean, the banana seller, fairs, so many people have related to this poem, which we were going to talk about towards the end, but since we started with it, let's stay with it. And also, as Amrita says, that at the Mazar of Baris Shah in Pakistan, they sing it during the Urs every year. So it's traveled in many places. But one of the interesting stories that she tells is that she knew Shahnawaz, who was the one who was, Major Shahnawaz, who was the one who was dealing with abducted women. And he brought her so many stories. And it was on one of those stories that she based Pinjar, but also the listening to the stories of abducted women is what inspired her to write this poem. And you made that point, Nirupama, about it being the first dirge, the first poem, and also the first thing. It's so interesting that the first dirge on partition focuses on women, brings out a women's point of view. It focuses on the large scale rape and abduction of women. And you're absolutely right to say that for male writers, this wasn't a subject that they even wanted to head towards, most of them. So I find it very interesting that that's one of the first voices to raise this major issue. And yet it's not until very much later that the issue starts to get talked about, even by historians and others. Have you ever wondered why? Do you have any speculation that you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I suppose, I don't know, for one thing that in male writings, women by and large have been marginalized to some extent. They are there as the good mother or, inspiring bhabhi. But to go into the, into this kind of a mass exploitation of women in the name of religion, in the name of patriotism, in the name of two countries coming up. It was not, I don't think it was very easy for a male writer to approach. For a woman, it was so easy, so spontaneous. And she knew Shah Nawaz, as you said. She also, at the time when the abducted girls were this is what she told me, being brought back, she was close to Mrinalini Sarabhai and I.K. Gujarat. They were involved in that committee. They were members of that committee who were bringing back
Mridula Sarabhai. Mridula
Sarabhai.
Yeah.
And it was all these experiences led her to weave the story of Puro in Pinjar. Should I tell that story briefly?
Yes, please.
Story?
Yeah.
You see, the story of Puro is the story of two feudal Jatt landowner families. One happens to be Sikh and the other Muslim. And Puro's uncle, over a land feud, in which some wrong judgment has come, abducts a girl from the Muslim family, rapes her, and then discards her. As Puro is growing up, she's engaged to marry a boy who's a freedom fighter, well-read, intellectual. What happens is that now the Jatt family gives this task to their son, to the nephew of the man who had abducted whose aunt was abducted, to the nephew of that woman, that you have to abduct the girl and do what they did to your aunt. So he does it, but he is not able to rape her. He abducts her, he brings her home, and he keeps her there and waits, because he is attracted, and waits and hopes that Puro will respond. Puro is devastated, she was about to get married, everything was going for her, and this has happened. So one night she decides to run away back to her parents. And he knows that she's running away, but he keeps quiet and he follows her and waits. When she reaches her parents, she says, "I'm back. This is what happened to me." The parents, the mother and father, say, "No, now there is no place for you here. You just go back. What face will be shown to anyone? How will your younger sister get married?" So Puro is turned out. And there is this Rashid waiting for her. He takes her back and they eventually get married. Then comes Partition. The novel starts before the Partition. Then comes Partition, and the boy Puro was supposed to get married to, the Hindu boy, his sister is abducted. And somehow she's rescued, and Puro and Rashid look after her. And then her brother, who's married to this girl, and her ex-fiancé, whom she never married, they come to take her back. And then they make this offer to Puro. The boy says that I have no problems. I'm still willing to marry you. And Rashid goes into the crowd to let Puro make her own decision, go back if she wants. And then Puro says, she says, "No, I will not go back now. Now this is my home. There's a man who loves me. My life is made. A second time, don't come and inflict this on me." And that's where the novel ends.
Yeah, it's quite a stunning story, and really reflects the experience of so many women who were abducted and who, you know, who formed relationships of one kind or another with their abductors or to the person they were sold to. And then as when the operation to so-called recover them or rescue them began, they didn't want to come back because they didn't want a second dislocation. And also they knew, and this had happened in reality, that like Puro's family, the families rejected them. So this is really one of, if not the first novel post-partition to talk about this really important hidden story of partition. So this, along with the poem, are two of Amrita's major works on partition, right?
True, true.
But she did other work as well.
She did other works. You see, the partition lived with her. She did other works. Besides, I forgot to say, her magazine, her journal, Nagmani, published writers from both sides. So she nurtured writers not just here, but from Pakistan too. And I remember in her last few months, when she was very ill and there was less hope, she once called me and she says, I have something to show you. And when I reached there, she showed me there were 3 chadars in green, what you put in the mazars. So with all that gold work done on it and something written in Urdu. So she showed me those. She says the writers of, I think that was the time when a year or two after she had got that Millennium Poet Award from Delhi, they had gone to 3 mazars, Waris Shah's mazar, Sultan Bahu's, and Baba Bulle Shah. And they had collected 3 chadars from there, which Ilyas Khumman, one of the Punjabi writers from across the border, who used to write, brought for her. And the note said that these are for you because you are the true Waris of Waris Shah. So this was something tremendous to achieve in a culture, you know, this kind of adulation, this kind of love which came to Amrita. And in a way, she represented not just the subcontinent, you know. And also, I think in her writings, there was a lot of, she dwelt a lot on love. Love in all kinds of ways, you know. Love and the choice to love. A woman's choice to love, the person she'll choose to love, rather than being forced into a, you know, an unhappy marriage or something that has gone wrong. The freedom and love were 2 things which she dwelt on all her life. One of her very touching stories, a short story again, from Partition was called Kameen. You know, Kameen is usually used for workers in the villages who belong to the low caste. They are called the mean ones, the Kamine.
So the word Kamina comes from there.
Yeah, Kameen. If you translate it, it comes mean, in the mean folk. So there is this woman and this boy from a affluent family is attracted to her and likes her, and he's always taunted that, you know, you are giving attention to this Kameen, this mean girl, you know. And finally, when the riots start and the attack is to come, it is this girl who makes sure that the lover crosses across safely. And I think the end of the story, there was a sort of a little sarcasm on who is mean, you know.
Who is mean?
Besides, you know, the Pakistan, Hindustan problem, in Indo-Pak problem, and what was happening was recorded in her various writings, in her stories, in her essays. And she always highlighted writers from that side. And one of them was a very talented writer called Sara Shagufta. She even wrote her biography called Iksi Sara and published her. So that means, this Amrita stood as a towering figure for people who would come from Pakistan to meet Amrita. That if they've come to India, if they can see Amrita, it would be something. And just going a little away from the point, I'll just tell you that one of her poet friends, someone she knew, called Chandatrika, he has related the story, written about it. Amrita never went back to Lahore. Yeah. Ironically or sadly, Urvashi, most of the writers who came away never went back. Among them were Krishan Chandra, Rajinder Singh Bedi. I think it was too painful to return.
Too painful, yeah.
To return. Secondly, they got so involved in just making their lives all over again. And they didn't want to sort of return to Lahore. We go to Lahore very easily, we love to go, but they could never bring themselves to go back to Lahore. So Chandatrika was going. So she said, okay, Chandra, do me one favor. When you go to Lahore, just visit the radio station there and just see if someone remembers me in Lahore. So when Chandatrika went there, first thing he noticed that among all the famous announcers of that station, Amrita's picture was also on the wall. And then he asked someone, they said, yes, of course. He says, don't worry, I'll take you somewhere. He took her to a place near Amrita's house, which was next to it used to be a pan ki dukan, a pan shop in the old days before partition. By the time Chandatrika went there, it had become a big grocery shop. So he says, this is where Amrita lived, and her first floor window used to open on this shop. And this is where Sahir Ludhianvi used to come and buy cigarettes from there and keep smoking until the window opened. And once the window opened, he'd stub his cigarette and walk off. And he said this would happen, sometimes he had to smoke a whole packet waiting for Amrita to return. Also, you see...
Sorry to interrupt, but she has this little story about how she would collect those stubs.
So stubs, yeah.
Take a puff.
Yeah. When they got to know each other and the romance was moving, he used to visit her and he would smoke and leave. He had a habit of smoking half a cigarette and then leave. Amrita would collect the stubs and smoke them. Maybe she says, that's how I started smoking. And her great attraction for Sahir Ludhianvi was also for attraction for a man from the forbidden religion or the hated religion, That was also in itself a way of saying it, religion and other things don't matter to me. In one of her, memoirs on how when they fled during partition, she says there were two things. Sahir's very famous poem, Taj Mahal, Meri Mehboob Kahin Aur Mila Kar Mujhse. He had calligraphed it and framed it and gifted it to Amrita. And it used to hang in the living room of her Lahore house. Amrita, in turn, had gifted him a Parker pen. Okay. So when she fled the house, she said no, she didn't have the time or to collect anything. And that poem remained there. And Sahir, when he was doing trips between Lahore and India, he went off to Lahore, then he came back. At the railway station, someone stole his Parker pen. So she says both the gifts of love were lost to partition. We don't have them with us.
What a lovely story. Nirupama, let me ask you a little question now. Let's turn to the subject of teaching partition a little bit. So, now as you talk, there are stories of pain and loss and terrible violence that are there in Main Aankhan Waris Shah or Pinjar, or apparently she wrote a story which I have not read. You may know it, which is a story told from the point of view of a child who is the child of an abducted woman. And I don't know which one this is, but I read about it somewhere.
I haven't read it,
but
I look for it.
Okay. So how, at this moment when the issues that she was talking about also, like freedom and love, which are really now so precious because they are so, they're disappearing or so contested. How do you think it would be possible, or would it be possible to teach students about partition through, say, the work of writers like Amrita? And what kind of opportunities does that present? What kind of difficulties does that pose? Are students ready to learn of these bloody histories? Should we put these histories before them? Are they only bloody histories, or are they other histories as well? I mean, these are all the things you've mentioned, but in the context of teaching, what do you think about this?
Urvashi, you have experienced this from your own family and from the people who had gone through partition. I did so from my own family. There was a great silence. As children, we did not know what had happened to who. And I remember there was an aunt, a distant aunt, living in Chandigarh itself. They had fled from Saiwal. She had 3 daughters. The son was away. The son was, doing a job or something in what is now India. And when the mobs came, the son-in-law was there, 3 daughters, and the eldest had just given a birth to a 1-month-old baby. When the time came, they decided that the girls have to be killed. There's no way they'll be able to save them. So this son-in-law first killed his wife, then the second one, his sister-in-law, and the third, who was a 14-year-old girl. When she was asked to put her head down, she got scared and ran. So the mother held the head down, and she too was beheaded. Mm. And when the little baby in arms, they fled. Mm. This I learned when I was in college or something. It was never told. We used to visit this Thai of ours. She was a jolly woman smoking a bidi, saying all kinds of things and stories. And no one ever mentioned this. Much later, I learned of this. And when we talk of, say, high school, today the children have so much of exposure to all kinds of things, on the net and other places. They see so much, they know so much. What the merit of works of Amrita and other writers, who have even Manto or Rajinder Singh Bedi or several writers in Pakistan, that literature, its one quality is there's no hatred in it. Literature is an act of love, else it is not literature. Then it doesn't qualify. So these stories, novels, poems are with love, and they give the right direction also. They condemn what was wrong, whether it was done by a Hindu, a Muslim, or a Sikh. So I feel we should not shy away from teaching. And we should also, these have to be taught in the context that what communal violence, and not just that, after that, our side we have seen 1984 killings of the Sikhs in all over the country, but Delhi in a very sad way, atrocities on women. We have seen Gujarat. We have seen so much that maybe the children know a lot already And of course, there are those children who have suffered it on their own bodies and souls. So I think in the right context, literature would be something, literature of strife, literature of unhappy times, literature of communal rift, because literature always speaks for love, for amity, for compassion. I think we should not even hesitate. I think our children would need to know it. It is their right to know it.
Yeah, I think you're so right, because in some ways, really literature brings to what in my head is, I think of as the really arid terrain of history. It brings to it a sort of sense of feeling and emotion and complexity of daily life, which history so far has really not been able to address very well. But also I was thinking when you were talking about Amrita, how easily your reflections on her work on partition moved almost seamlessly into other areas which do not directly focus on the content of that work, but which are the peripheral stories that attach to it, like the story of Faiz Ahmed Faiz reading Waris Shah in prison, like the story of the banana seller, like the story of the embroidered or the calligraphed thing that Sahir Ludhianvi gave to her, and so on, which are all also stories that actually can add to the content of a work of fiction or a work of literature which is being taught in schools, to perhaps bring in history as it is lived by real people, and which would then perhaps make the work much more interesting. What do you think?
Absolutely, Urvashi. Absolutely. And I think you as a publisher, as a writer, have done a lot of work in this area. And The Other Side of Silence, your book sort of broke many myths, which were part of partition and part of what happened during partition. So I think we cannot push them under the carpet as such. Let's not let our kids not. Now our kids are living through it. They have to know, and they have to be ready.
And especially today, actually, in this context. But I remember,
Yes.
sorry, go on.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
I remember long ago, a group of students from 17 schools in Delhi came together and they'd all read my book on partition, and they were all like 10th, 11th, 12th class students. And they came together in groups of 2 to discuss it. And I have to say, I was really impressed and struck by how deeply they had engaged with what might have been really quite worrying and violent material. So you're right when you say that young people today are exposed to so much. They know it all, perhaps more than we do.
Perhaps more than we do.
Okay, shall we? So I think it's getting close to time when we should open it up for questions.
Sure.
But before we do that, should we listen to Amrita reciting Waris Shah in her own words? And do you have your translation of it handy?
Yeah, I have.
Why don't we actually hear it in English first and then in the Punjabi?
Okay. You see, Amrita was very good at reciting a poem also. And I remember her, I've seen her recite this poem much later, after she got the Gyanpith, which was in 1981, I think, at a function was held in Jalandhar. She would wear she was very fond of wearing black. That enhanced her beauty, her fair complexion. She was wearing a black velvet shirt and black bangles to match. And then she would go in almost a trance and say, Akam Waris Shanu. Here is a translation of it. can't be that good, but, and just two little things more I'll tell you about this poem. Just to tell you what was the response by the male writers in our side of Punjab. One was that why did she address it to Waris Shah? Why couldn't she address it to one of the gurus? You know, the other was,
I remember
why
that.
couldn't
She got into trouble in Punjab because they said, why didn't you address it to Nanak also? Right? Yeah.
and
So,
the leftists said, why not Lenin? It should have been addressed to Lenin. A call to Waris Shah. Waris Shah, I call out to you today to rise from your grave. Rise and open a new page of the immortal book of love. A daughter of Punjab once wept, and you wrote many a dirge. 1,000,000 daughters weep today and look at you for solace. Rise, O beloved of the aggrieved. Just look at your Punjab. Today corpses haunt the woods, and with blood filled is Chenab. Someone has blended poison in the 5 rivers of Punjab. This water runs through the verdant fields and glades. This fertile land has sprouted poisonous weeds far and near. Seeds of hatred have grown high. Bloodshed is everywhere. Poison breeze in the forest turn bamboo flutes into snakes. Their venom has turned the bright and rosy Punjab all blue. Throats have forgotten how to sing. The yarn is now broken. Friends are lost, and the spinning wheel has gone silent. Boats released from the harbor toss in the rough waters. The people has broken its branches on which swings hung. The flutes that played notes of love are now lost forever. Brothers of Ranja have lost. The brothers of Ranja have lost their devotion, his charm. Blood rains over the earth, even the graves are oozing red. The princess of love, I think I left the last few lines somewhere. The princesses of love are weeping midst mazars. Where do I go and fetch Waris Shah once more? You know, one of the most touching lines, you can't do justice to it in Punjabi, is when she talks about, rape and murder and every possible atrocity on women, she says, because she's talking from the land of the lovers and great love legions, she says, Ranje de sab veer, aj bhul gaye uski jaach. That the brothers of Ranja had forgotten what love is.
You know, before we listen to it in Amrita's words, Nirupama, I was reminded of one of the interviews I did for my work on Partition long, long ago, when I was talking to a man called Mangal Singh, who, like, as you mentioned, many in Sardar families had killed his family of 17, 18 members along with his 2 brothers. And I asked him this, that how did you forget? How did you carry this grief on your heart all these years? And he responded to me in Punjabi, and I was reminded of that. So I wanted to tell you his response in Punjabi. So he said to me, "Tusi apne aas-paas dekho, ਇਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੋਨੇ ਦੀ ਚਿੜੀਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਅੰਜੂ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਭੁਲਾਣਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਚਿਆ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਕੁਝ ਵਾਪਸ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ meaning that look around you at this land of the Punjab, we call it Sone ki Chidiya, the golden bird, and we have put all our tears and all our forgetting into this land, and we have irrigated it with our tears. and it has given us back so much. So I was just reminded of it when you were reading, because so much that Amrita says about the Chenab and rivers of blood and all the grief that that land is carrying was just resonated with me. Okay, you have many questions in the chat box. So let's ask Megha to first give us the poem, and then we'll turn directly to the questions. So we'll have a good half hour for the questions. Megha, over to you.
Yes, coming up. I don't need to share screen for this since it's just an audio.
अज आखां वारिस शाह नूं कितों कबरां विचों बोल अज आखां वारिस शाह नूं कितों कबरां विचों बोल ते अज किताबे इश्क दा कोई अगला वर्का खोल एक रोई सी धी पंजाब दी तू लिख लिख मारे बैन वे अज लखां धीआं रोंदियां तैनूं वारिस शाह नूं कहण उठ दर्द मंदां दिया दर्दिया उठ तक अपना पंजाब उठ दर्द मंदां दिया दर्दिया उठ तक अपना पंजाब अज बेले लाशां विछियां ते लहू दी भरी जनाब किसे ने पंजां पानियां विच दित्ती जहर रला ते उन्हां पानियां धरतों दित्ता पानी ला इस जरखेज जमीन ते लूहों फुटिया जहर गिठ गिठ चढ़ियां लालियां फुट फुट चढ़िया कहर विहो बलिसी वाख वन वन बगी जा उन्हें हर एक बांस दी मंजली दित्ती नाग बना नागा कीले लोक नूं बस फिर डंग ही डंग पलो पली पंजाब दे नीले पै गए अंग वे गलियों टुटे गीत फिर त्रकलियों टुटी तंग त्रीनों टुटियां सेलियां चरखड़े कूकर बंद सने सेज दे पीड़ियां लुड्डन दित्तियां रोड़ सने डालियां पीन अज पिपलां दित्ती तोड़ जिथे वजदी सी फूक प्यार दी वो वंजली गई गुआच जिथे वजदी सी फूक प्यार दी वो वंजली गई गुआच रांझे दे सब वीर अज भुल गए उसकी जाच धरती ते लहू वसिया कबरां पईयां चोण प्रीत दियां शहजादियां अज विच मज़ारां रोण धरती ते लहू वसिया कबरां पईयां चोण प्रीत दियां शहजादियां अज विच मज़ारां रोण अज सभे हुक्म बन गए वे अज सभे कैदों बन गए हुसन इश्क दे चोर अज कित्थों मुझे लब के वारिस शाह कबरां विचों बोल ते अज किताबे इश्क दा कोई अगला वर्का खोल
Thank you, Megha. Thank you so much. We'll turn to the questions. Megha, is this something Rajasmita is doing, or am I doing it?
Rajasmita can do that. Yeah.
Rajasmita will do. Rajasmita, before you go to the questions, I'm sorry, I'm just usurping it from because I have the mic. There's one question which says, what's the reason we have so much of partition of Punjab? And Nehal, somebody has asked this question. And very little focus to Bengal. Actually, the reason why today we are focusing on Punjab is because you have two Punjabis here and talking to each other, and both have worked on Punjab, and the writer we are talking about was a Punjabi writer. But you're quite right that there wasn't that much focus on Bengal, but now in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a huge amount of really important work, not only on Bengal, but also on the Northeast and Partition and beyond. So the Punjabis are dominating only today, not all the time. Rajasmita, over to you for the questions.
And these questions, I think, maybe for both of you all, right?
Right. So thank you so much. I'm going to try and go in order as the questions have come in, and you can choose to answer as you like between the both of you. So this is from Gauri Mishra, who asks, I would love to know a little about her work, Rasidi Ticket. Does it have any personal experiences of partition?
It does, and this is for Nirupama because she knows the work much better than I do.
Yes, a Rasidi Ticket has a whole chapter in context of this poem that she wrote. You know, because Rasidi Ticket was written much later. So she goes. And one thing I would like to add, Amrita was a precocious child. When her father was a spiritual poet, Kartar Singh Hitkari, she would find, if he stumbled for a word, even at 8, she would tell him. She was brought up in that tradition of poetry and scriptures, that you could replace it with this word. Yet her grandmother in her kitchen had 3 tumblers which were kept away in one corner. And when Amrita once asked her that, why have you kept those there? What try to drink water from? She said, no. Musalman gilas ne te, sade Hindu gilas ne, Sikh gilas. So even as a kid, she questioned. Those glasses were kept if some Muslim friends of her father came over. They would be served tea or buttermilk in that. So she had a questioning mind. Yes, partition figures in her, the CD, and also her childhood memories. But it was written, much later. By then she had exhausted partition in her fiction and poetry, but she does refer to it. There can be no way that, she won't refer to it.
The next one is from Aishwarya Thakur. She asks, Amrita's literary work on partition has been compared with contemporary writers like Krishna Sopti and Khushwant Singh. How fair is this comparison?
May I give half the answer?
Yes, please, as you like.
Just half an answer I'll give. Yes, all 3 wrote on partition. But if I were to be fair and true, Krishna's work is far beyond the other 2. She was primarily a fiction writer of great merit, and she built up the composite culture of Punjab as it was. And she showed that and how it went. It was set in a village. Khushwant Singh's story, Train to Pakistan. Khushwant Singh wrote fiction in English. But it was a very predictable love story. He was not that deep a writer of fiction. So if you were to take fiction, I'm being, obnoxious by saying that, it would be Krishna Sopti, Amrita Pritam, and then Khushwant Singh. But the poem, Amrita swept the emotions of everyone with Aja Kamwaris Shanu. And I just want to tell you what Khushwant Singh, as he would write with malice to one and all, he wrote a lot about Amrita, but in his obituary to her, he said he was this girl, semi-educated girl, and of course, very stunningly beautiful. And she became so famous. Uh, but what did she have to her credit? Just a 14. What else she wrote was not much, but those 14 lines on partition, Ajaka Varis Shanu, were to make her famous on both sides of the border. This was Khushwant Singh on Amrita Pritam and Krishna Sopti. When the feud happened between them for copyright, which many here would be knowing, Krishna told me that मैं अमृता की इज्जत करती थी, क्योंकि जो कवि होता है, शायर होता है, उसे हम कहानी कहने वाले अपने से ऊपर समझते हैं. So it is this kind of an exchange, you can think for yourself.
Yeah, if I could add to it, Nirupama has said it all actually. I'd only add that actually it's a pity that fiction writing on partition of the first generation of writers, that is the Khushwant Singhs and Rajinder Singh Bedis and Krishna Baldev Ved and various others of that time, is often limited only to the big writers, like Khushwant, who was a big man, and but there are so many other writers who wrote so beautifully of that time. And I think it's important also to look at those. We don't often. I was trying to remember, what came to my. There's a book that I read. I don't know if any of you who are listening have read it. Wonderful book by a woman called Altaf Fatima, called The One Who Did Not Ask, about partition. One novel translated from Urdu. There is really interesting book called Shadows of Time by somebody called Meher Nigar Masood, which foreshadows partition. So there are writers who write about the violence out of the direct experience of it, but there are many others who have written about its aftermath and its pre-partition times. Zahida Hina's work is really quite stunning. So I think partition literature now, with the kind of discoveries that are being made in the world of literature, is actually a lot wider and deeper than just the big names from that time.
And also, I don't know, Urvashi, if you would agree, that it is a work in progress.
It is more and more. The new generation is writing it so differently.
It's in progress.
Stories and true.
Thank you for adding to our list while we revisit this now. Also from Aishwarya Thakur, she asks, and a pertinent question that revolves in literary circles, who translated her works from Punjabi to Hindi, since no mention of any translators are found. Would you like to comment on this?
Nirupama, this is for you.
Yeah.
You're the Amrita expert.
Yeah. Since I'm close to her and I'm close to also many of the people who translated, I will be able to answer the question fairly. What Amrita was living for many years was by writing fiction, which was published by Hind Pocket Books. And Urdu also, I don't know, Hind Pocket Books had an Urdu branch also, if I'm not wrong, in those days. So many of the novels would first come out in Urdu and Hindi. She used to get 1,000 rupees for one novel. But this in the late 50s and 60s was big money. And her novels, if you notice, are very slim novels. They're slim novels. Very often what she would do, she would make someone sit with her who knows the Urdu script and who knows the Devanagari script. And she would speak out, and together it would be translated. And the person who did it was given something, but the name was never there. Her main translator, however, from Punjabi to Hindi is a close friend and was very close to Amrita, a professor from one of the Delhi colleges, Amia Kovar. You know, Amrita's persona was such that even to be able to translate her work for someone who was not living by translation was considered an honor, you know. So I think Amia Kumar in her last 20, 30 years was the closest to her. And she translated as many as 39 books into Hindi. Of course, Amrita would always intervene and see how it's done. And the name she got was only on nine or 10 books. And she would not, money was not the way Amrita did her transactions. But at the end of the year, she would give her, this was the old, I think, the old feudal way of doing. Whenever some money came up Amrita's way, she would buy, if Amia was there, she would vouch for the story. She would buy her gold earrings, sometimes a ring, sometimes a chain, and that is how it worked.
Thank you so much. We now have a couple of comments from people saying that partition literature has now been introduced as a paper in Delhi University syllabus, and someone saying that grade 12th history does talk about partition and also brings in oral histories. So that was just to say that, well, we are making some progress, it seems, however slowly that is. The next question is from Wasim Bhatt. How far do you think that understanding of partition would bring the much needed love and harmony in the people living across the borders?
Nirupama, do you want to go first on that, or do you want
You go first on that? I might just add a line. You would know better.
So I think, one of the issues about the ways in which the borders have been so rigid between our countries is that knowledge flows, also literature flows, all of these things have found it more difficult than would otherwise be the case. And when you don't know about something, it's so much easier to build it up into proportions that make you feel very fearful of it. So, which is why you will find many Indians saying, oh, Pakistanis are terrible people and terrible things happen in Pakistan and so on. And how can you go there? I mean, when at the time that I was going there I often got this question, isn't it dangerous? Isn't it scary? Are they not fanatics? But all I ever got was love and welcoming. And, in the end, people are just people. So I think that it's very important that we share literature, but not only literature, that we share conversations, etc. Of course, unpleasant things will come up. Not that they won't. Of course, prejudice will rear its ugly head. But at least we will be able to exercise our judgment with knowledge instead of being left at the mercy of prejudice and misinformation and fake news and all of that. So, I mean, this is not a direct answer to your question, but I think that 70 plus years after India and Pakistan became two countries, it seems to me ridiculous to be fighting like children and saying we can't have any contact, we can't have any communication, we can't share literature, we can't talk to each other, we can't talk about each other, we can't do research in each other's countries. It's madness. Where in the world do you have something like this apart from Israel and Palestine? And we know why that is. Or North and South Korea, even they are better than us. So I really think there is no replacement for sharing information and knowledge. Whether it'll bring love or not, I don't know, but I certainly think it will bring a much deeper understanding than we have today. Nirupama, over to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to it I have been a frequent visitor to Pakistan in my childhood because one of my Masi's husband, my Masa uncle, was the only Hindu officer in the Pakistan army. He was a doctor and he opted to stay on. And again, after wars and in recent times, after 2000, uh, you don't find animosity in the people there. The people there are as open, or maybe sometimes more than they would be here. And a very dear friend of mine who was in government service and um, who was talking about, he says the people to people and the civil societies movement took off very well in both Pakistan and India, is that this is a problem of the ruling elite, not the problem of common people. It never was, and it still isn't.
But Nirupama, just to add to that, that at the level of common people, there is an amount of fear and prejudice of what you don't know. And I think that's really what needs to be addressed. You're absolutely right that...
No, I understand what you're saying, and it's very valid that you say that. Yeah, in recent times, you have seen if you say anything, anyone says anything, there are people who will turn around and say that, go to Pakistan. Why are you here? That is, that again, that is a very sad state of affairs. And I don't know how much of effort and how much of what are the intentions that have gone into the whipping of such sentiments, and also a lot of people find Punjab very suspect. This is on the other side of the border also, that why this Punjabi born homie, You see, the shared language is something very important. A shared language means a shared culture, a shared way of life. So, but this kind of unhappy and a situation where Pakistan is used as like a swear word, that, and if it is done across the border also, just as bad. I'm glad, Urvashi, you have pointed to this,
But I want to tell you a little story. So our collective answer to this question is becoming a bit long. But this is a story I talk about in my book, but it goes beyond the book. So it's a story of two friends, and it actually begins when the cross-border people's groups were coming across the borders, when civil society movement was happening a lot. And there was a young man who wanted to come from Pakistan. He wanted to come. And his mother refused to let him go because she was worried that he would be killed or something terrible would happen. And then I don't exactly remember the details. Somebody in the family pulled out a wad of letters from hidden inside one cupboard, which were letters written by his grandfather called Chaudhry Latif, who was a partition survivor, refugee from India to Lahore. And they were letters to a Punjabi man called Bedi, who had moved to Jalandhar from Lahore. And Latif had occupied Bedi's house. And after several months of worrying about, leaving behind his things in his house, Bedi, who was a school teacher, wrote a letter to the house, to the occupant of the house, saying the occupant. And the two men started writing to each other, and they became close friends across the border, and they kept up this correspondence for many years. Then, and helping each other with pensions and, sorting out papers and sending things across. Then I suppose one of them died, friendship ended. And many years later, when the grandson was wanting to come to India, his mother was not letting him come. These letters from the grandfather establishing a human relationship became an important way for him to take that step. And he did come, but the other interesting thing that happened was, and I wrote about this in my book, and several years after the book, I got an email from somebody in Chandigarh, actually, saying that, this man you've written about is my grandfather. And I knew nothing about this story of his. And can you tell me a bit more? And as it happened, I had photocopies of those letters with me. So I sent them across, and she has those letters to her grandfather from his friend across the border. So these are also, I think, there's so many stories like this which can enter the classroom in very interesting ways.
What can I say after a story like that, really? Uh, but going back to what Nirupama ma'am pointed out, on the idea of shared language and therefore shared culture, we have a question from Zahid Khan, who says, the way words or language were used might have different meanings for people who experienced and attached meanings to those words, language. Why should we be cautious about the origin of words and not the meanings attached to them? For anyone to take it up, really.
I think the question's really to Nirupama.
I'm not very clear about the question.
Would you
I
want
have not
to
understood it fully.
Well, let me try to respond. I would say, Zahid, that we need to be attentive to both. I don't think it's an either or thing. The origin is important, but the origin, you're quite right to point out that language is not fixed and it changes. No? So obviously the meanings attached to words will also change over time. And I think we have to be attentive to both.
Yes, that now I think I've got it. Yes, that is a problem. I especially find when Punjabi poets from this side are sharing their works with Punjabi poets the other side, there are many words. Like Surjit Patel, the Punjabi poet, will use hinsa for violence. Now, across the border, hinsa is not understood. So that way the touch is lost over these many years. This side there has been more impact of Hindi, Sanskrit on Punjabi, the other side more of Persian, Arabic. So the touch of rustic Punjabi is lost to some extent.
So I'll pick up from there, and this is a comment from Amrita Bhala on Khushwant Singh's going back to his village in Pakistan. Khushwant Singh also wrote on Partition and went to his village in Pakistan. The entire area came out to welcome him, and he wept, saying, "I will never come back here again." Too heart-wrenching. Would you like to comment on this?
Sorry, say that again, Rajasmita. What was it from Aishwarya? I'm just looking.
Yeah, she says, Khushwant Singh also wrote on Partition and went to his village in Pakistan. The entire area came out to welcome him, and he wept, saying, "I will never come back here again." Would you like to comment on this, since we brought this up? You had brought this up during the conversation about the pain of really going back, which is what stopped a lot of them from doing so. So yeah, if you'd like to comment on that.
I don't think Khushwant Singh's return and his comment, the pain of partition, I suppose, can be of two kinds. One is the pain of the loss, and one is, I'm saying, what am I trying to say? If he had gone back and been faced with hatred and violence and so on and so forth, it would have been very, very painful. But to be also welcomed and loved and offered all that kind of memory and caring and remembrance and all of that is also extremely painful, because it reminds you of the loss of partition, the pain of partition as a whole. And to say that I will never go back is to say I can't bear to experience that pain. I think that is a reality for so many people. So many people, as Nirupama also pointed out, many writers did not want to go back. I took my mother back to Lahore, to her home in Lahore, where her brother was still living. About 42 or 43 years after partition, I took her back. And she was very torn, very reluctant to go, and yet wanting to go and not knowing what that experience would do to her. And it was difficult. It wasn't an easy thing. So I suppose it's that kind of pain. That's what he's talking about.
Thank you. And thank you for kind of personalizing that really overwhelming nature of pain. Um, Now I'm going to go to this question, which borrows from that in a way. Shubhasri asks, as a woman born long after partition, I'm sometimes surprised at how the partition stories emotionally overwhelm me. I teach at a college in Kolkata and I suffer from this anxiety that I shall fall in objectivity and critically engaging with partition annals because I get so carried away by them. How can we adopt critical objectivity when teaching partition literature to students?
Vishri, can I come in on this? I don't think we need to be at all objective. I think critical objectivity is completely overrated. Imagine if you were teaching people about the violence that marginalized communities are facing in India today. Is there any way that you can be objective about what happened in Hathras? Don't even try it. I mean, partition is a painful chapter in our history, and one can't be objective about it. I wouldn't even try it. I mean, I wrote about partition 22 years ago. When I talk about it, it still makes me weep. It still hurts me deeply. And I don't see why we should not communicate that pain, that hurt, that loss, and also actually that love and sharing across borders to our students. It's the only honest way to teach about a subject which has so many lessons for us in terms of human behavior and the formation of nations and the difficulties or the relationship between the state and its citizens, and on gender, so much to learn from. But I don't know, why should we be objective? You're hurt by it, you're hurt by it. You're angry by it, you're angry by it. Your students should get that.
Thank you. From that, we get into a question on cross-border relations. So how do we respond to those who, this is from Aniri, sorry. How do we respond to those who look at India-Pakistan relations as a zero-sum game, which centers around a militarized discourse of cross-border terrorism, protecting sovereignty, etc.? Those who have entrenched patterns of thinking about the relationship between the two countries from the masculine discourse of competition, honor, etc.
Nirupama, do you want to go first on this?
No, I think, Urvashi, you'll handle it better. You're equipped to handle it better.
That's a cheat. I don't know. Aneri, this is a tough question. Sometimes it feels like there is no conversation to be had with people who are entrenched in those kinds of masculinist discourses and who have internalized honor, patriarchy so deeply. But I think that the only way to respond or to keep a conversation open is through talking about human stories and through talking about relationships across the border, which actually give the lie to the discourse that is trying to be created, which is all black and white. So I think that those stories actually mean a lot, and perhaps that's the only way we can engage. And I think that, I don't know, but at this age in my life, I have begun to think that one needs to listen and engage with people whose views are so different from your own, just to try and understand also where they're coming from, and maybe then find a way to talk to them. So years ago, if you had asked a question, I would have said, forget them, I don't care about them, or let's dismiss them out of our lives. But I don't think we can. So I think maybe we have to find a way of talking about them. And I can only think of this possibility, that at a human level, somewhere it might resonate, because they might have adopted, maybe the humanity is not gone. Maybe we can hope that somewhere down there, there's something left. I don't know. Nirupama, what do you think?
Yes. For one, For one, we have to, because the numbers of those who think like this outnumber more rational thinking in a big way. And even within families now, I find my brothers thinking very differently. So it has become a good question, and Urvashi has said well that we have to look at where is it coming from, this kind of a stand.
The next question is from Amrita, who says, would you say that Manto also dealt with the experience of women, Kholdo, Thanda Gosht?
You have to answer this. I'm not going to, because I have a very unpopular view on Manto.
No, I'll do it. Of course, Manto did it. There's no saying that Manto didn't see what was happening and what impact it was happening on women. And even in his other stories, women have always been there. And so also in the partition stories, they are there. And Manto is studied by, like him or not, he has been one of the major sources for the history of the bloodshed in Pakistan, creation of Pakistan. And yes, it has been there. Sometimes in one or two stories, it has been done positively also, where a woman disrobes herself just to attract the attention of the mob so that her Sikh friend is saved and he can move away. So everything is not, of course, Manto does it very brutally, but I'm sure, Urvashi, you should add to it what you feel.
I don't know. I think, yes, of course, he does deal with women and their experiences. I don't know. I'm just not sure. As I said, I have a very unpopular view. I find a lot of misogyny in the way he deals with women. I could be completely wrong. And I have not read him in Urdu, but I've read him in English. But in the ways in which women are sometimes reduced to the sum of their body parts, that worries me quite a lot. So,
कौन आया? Oh hi.
यार अपना माइक तो बंद कर लो.
वही मैंने कहा ये बंदा तो बदल गया, पतला हो गया, क्या हो गया?
विशव, रक्षा, अपना माइक बंद कर लीजिए, हमको आपकी सारी आवाजें सुन रही हैं.
Should be okay. Thank you. In fact, one of the questions later was, could you share your unpopular opinion on Manto? So you have answered that. Thank you. The next one is from Kunal Mukherjee. Do you think women writers have done a better job than the men writers in sort of bringing personal loss of partition in light and providing catharsis?
I don't know about providing catharsis, because I don't know how many writers intend to do that. But in general, I would say women writers do a better job than male writers, whether on partition or otherwise. But I will also frankly admit that I am completely prejudiced because I publish women writers.
The one after that is Mrinal Chakraborty, who says how to relate to Amrita Pritam to present generation, who has no clue about pain of partition, was trying to introduce her or Manto to my adult daughter. Would you like to take that on?
Nirupama, your turn.
I do not understand fully, because the child obviously has not been told anything about partition. The child hasn't read anything. but still, it is not, still there's no problem in introducing these writers to her. She will, as she reads, she will know that this has happened in many places in the world, so also where we live. So I think there should be no difficulty or no hesitation. But those who have been through the first generation or the second generation, of course, respond to it in an emotive way. But if the work of literature is good enough, it will be able to carry the reader of many generations with it.
Also, maybe, I don't know, Mrinal, in response to your question, Nirupama told us so many interesting details about Amrita's life as a young woman, young girl, and how she came to poetry and how she came to writing. And that may be an entry point which could, allow your young daughter to relate to somebody who was a young woman, had these kind of desires to write, and then maybe you can lead on to other aspects of her life.
Thank you. Now, I know we've run over time. There are still quite a few. Could we take one last question and then kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. So the last one for now will be from Purva Gulati. A partition writer is somewhere above moralizing, preaching, and subjectiveness, portraying us the starker naked reality of partition, and readers are jolted out of the normality. Their pauses in the narrative transpose us to the darker realities. Amrita Pritam has somewhere blended making and unmaking of nation, as the essence of sanity and compositeness is somewhere shaken. What are your views on it?
I think this is a Nirupama question. Nirupama?
I'm a little, just give me the lead, Urvashi, then I'll take it over.
So, Purva is asking about women, partition writers, and saying that they don't necessarily preach or moralize, and rather they portray the naked reality of partition, which shakes readers, who read it, and that this portraying of the naked reality is there as much in the content as in the pauses in the narrative. And Amrita, she's talking about Amrita's work, as Amrita's work somehow blends the making and unmaking of a nation, in very deep ways. So maybe that's the bit that I thought you might like to respond about, the making and making of the nation in Amrita's work.
You see, for one, this thing of moralizing, and this is not the role of literature. This is the role of other kinds of disciplines. Literature is something very humane, and it is the human story that it relates. The other things are periphery to it. In fact, I remember, though I'm digressing from the point, but a contemporary of Amrita Pritam, a well-known playwright, Balwant Gargi, was once called for some state honor. And then the organizers told him that the minister or the bureaucrat who was there in his speech said that the writers must create more love among people, and they must, So then his reply was that the writer is not the one who can survive if he creates hatred. That is not the role of literature. Literature, wherever it's true, pamphlets and such things can do this job of, literature looks at both sides, looks dispassionately, tries to reach the truth through the writing. Another little, I'll end with a joke. You said during the days of terrorism in Punjab, militancy. Now what happens is, why one gets suspect about the government's role in such things. that, Punjab went through these long years and suddenly one day it was decided that things are going to change and all will be well. So suddenly the Punjab government started organizing communal harmony, uh, poetry symposium, and literary symposium. So one of our poets got up and to normalize the condition. So he said, I'll just say it in Punjabi first and then translate it. He said, "Tusi lagao te ਅਸੀਂ ਬੁਝਾਣ ਆਈਏ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ਾਇਰ ਹਾਂ, fire brigade nahi." That you should create a situation and then expect the writer to come and make it all right. Well, we are writers, not a fire brigade, We can't stop the fire that you start. So literature, if we talk of literature as true literature, cannot survive if it has a mean bone or if it has a hidden agenda. That is then pamphleteering and propaganda.
Yeah, and if I may add just a line to what Nirupama is saying, I think you're absolutely right, Purna, to say this, because really the discourse on the making or unmaking, but the making really of a nation is a discourse that has to be cast in very black and white lines, because the nation is made by a set of people, and another nation, or let's say you take India and Pakistan. So the history would be represented very differently from both sides. Whereas with literature, stories kind of transcend borders in the way that history or documentation or that kind of thing, or politics can't. And also, because so much partition literature relates to the lives of people who have lived across all three borders and now in the diaspora, you do see the questioning of that nation and the making of the nation in that very act of transcendence of the borders. And if I may, there was another question later which said, can I suggest some millennial writing? And there's a lot of it, but I would just say that there is a wonderful collection of graphic stories called This Side, That Side, which is, it's really put together by young writers and artists in all three countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the diaspora. And it's really worth reading. And in graphic stories, there are a bunch of new things. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the names now. But if you do want to, please just write to me or write to their hosts, and I will send you some names of, I'll send you a whole lot of names of young writers who are writing on partition. I think there's several generations of writers. So the ones who lived through the moment, and then much later, people like Shana Singh Baldwin, Kamila Shamsi, Uzma Aslam Khan, Shaheen Akhtar, so many others. And then you get the younger generation of millennials who are doing something very, very different.
All right, what a wholesome note to end this on. And thank you so much. Thank you, really. This has been very enlightening, and over it all, one most memorable evening for me. So thank you. I will now hand it back to Megha.
Urvashi and Nirupama, it's been overwhelming actually, so every time we listen to, Urvashi has done enough sessions, many sessions, and I hope she does many, many more. And I'm so glad that we got Nirupama to do this also. And each time, the importance of carrying on to talk about this issue hits home hard. And Urvashi, particularly, I'm so glad that you brought in this aspect of, teaching at the school level, because it's quite amazing that we're still ignoring that issue by and large. So thank you so much. I don't know how to say thank you, really.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
It's very nice being with all of you.
Thank you all. The messages are still streaming in about how good the session was.
Yeah, I'm reading them.
Yeah. So I'm not yet ending the meeting.
Done.
Thank you. Thank you again.